How are you guys doing? Today is Friday, March 4th, 2022. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to do an elite individual profile on Nick Castellanos, the elite outfielder who at the moment is a MLB free agent, is now turning 30. He is entering his 30s, and of course, with this episode, I'm going to zoom in and look at how Nick Castellanos has been able to affect his MLB teams on a micro level, game in, game out, to establish himself as one of the best players in the MLB, especially after this past season. Not to mention, I'm also going to zoom out and look at how he's been able to impact the game at a macro level, as Nick Castellanos is one of the better hitters. I would say one of the best hitters of his generation. I think he's a very overlooked player, and I believe once he gets signed to a team, I think that team will be very happy to have him, especially for this up-and-coming year, because Nick Castellanos is a player. No, he just hits for good average, and he just happens to bring a lot of production to the team that he's on. And with that said, I'm actually going to get right into Nick Castellanos' story. Of course, from the moment where he stepped foot on the big stage of the MLB to where he is right now, as he is just coming off of his very first All-Star season with the Cincinnati Reds this season. So, originally coming out of Davie, Florida, he would go on to play high school in Southern Florida. And he would go on to be selected in the 2010 MLB draft with the 44th overall pick by the Detroit Tigers. Looking at who else was drafted in that draft, Bryce Harper was taken out of that draft. Manny Machado was taken out of the first round of that draft by the Baltimore Orioles out of high school. Chris Sale was taken with the 13th overall pick by the White Sox out of Florida Gulf Coast. Christian Yelich was taken by the Florida Marlins at the time out of high school as well, just to get a sense. And Nick Castellanos was taken about 6 picks after Noah Syndergaard, who was taken by the Toronto Blue Jays. So, of course, you get a sense of how good Nick Castellanos was at a very young age, because, of course, Florida high school baseball is a very it's a very intense competition. So, of course, congrats for him to make it through, especially for him to be a supplemental first-round pick out of high school. It would take him a second to make it to the leagues. He would make it through in his age 21 season in 2013. His debut season would only see him play 11 games, in a season where the Detroit Tigers would finish with a 93-69 record. They had won the American League Central for the third year in a row that year. That was the year that Miguel Cabrera had won his most recent MVP, and Max Scherzer had won his very first Cy Young with the Detroit Tigers. In the 11 games he played, he probably finished with 5 hits in the 18 at-bats he had, finished with a 278 batting average and a 556 OPS. Didn't do much. That wasn't even counted as his rookie year. Once the Tigers made it to the playoffs that year, they would end up beating the Athletics in the American League Division Series, and that was the last series that they had won as a franchise, at least to date. But once they made it to the ALCS, they would end up losing in 6 to the Boston Red Sox. This would transition into Nick Castellanos' first full season with the Detroit Tigers. His rookie season would be his age 22 season in 2014. In 2014, he would play 148 games in a season where the Tigers finished with a 90-72 record. This would be the last time that the Tigers had made the playoffs, at least as a franchise. They had won 3 less games in the prior year. And in this year, Castellanos would finish with about 138 hits in the 148 games. He had 50 runs on the season. He had 31 doubles, the first time he would have 30 doubles in a season. He finished with 11 home runs, 66 RBIs. He would finish with a 259 batting average, which would be almost 20 points lower than his very first season, but this would be his rookie season. And he would go on to finish with a 700 OPS, as he would finish 8th in a American League Rookie of the Year race, as the American League Rookie of the Year this year would end up being Jose Abreu, a player who ended up winning an American League MVP on the Chicago White Sox. But following that very first season in Detroit, which would be the last time he made the playoffs with Detroit, he would return for a second full season. His age 23 season in 2015. In that season, he would go on to play 154 games in a season where the Detroit Tigers would finish with a 74-87 record. They would go on to win 16 less games in the prior season, as they would finish fifth in the AL Central. Castellanos would finish with 140 hits in those 154 games, as that would end up being 14 less hits than games played. He finished with 42 runs on the year, which was 8 less than the prior. He would finish with 33 doubles on the year, making it the second consecutive year to start his career in which he's had 30 doubles. His 6 triples would be the first time he would eclipse 5. He would finish with 15 home runs and 73 RBIs, which would be improvements over his rookie season. He finished with a 255 batting average, which was a tick lower than his rookie year, and he had a 721 OPS, which was a tick higher than what he had done the year before. He had shown that he was steadily improving as a player as he started to play more games over the season. This transitions into his third full season with the Detroit Tigers in his age 24 season in 2016. He would go on to play 110 games in a season where the Detroit Tigers would finish with an 86-75 record. They would win 12 more games in the prior season, finishing with the second best record in their division. They would miss the playoffs regardless. This was the year where Michael Fulmer would be named the Rookie of the Year in the American League. In this season, Castellanos would finish with 117 hits in 110 games, the first time he finished with more hits than games played. He had 54 runs on that year as well, as he also would finish with 25 doubles. 2016, he would see himself suffer to a little bit of injury within that year. He would miss 4 weeks as he was struck by a pitch, fracturing a metacarpal bone in his left hand. But regardless, still within those 110 games, he still finished with 18 home runs and 58 RBIs. His 18 home runs would be a career high for him at that point. He would finish with a 285 batting average, which was also a career high for him at that point. And his 331 on base percentage and his 496 slugging would add up to an 827 on 827 OPS. It'll be the first time he finished with an OPS over 800 and the first time he finished with an OPS plus over 100, meaning that his OPS was better than the average hitter. But that was his third full season in the league for a Tigers team that was not destined to make the playoffs again. His fourth full season with the Detroit Tigers would be his age 25 season in 2017. He would go on to play 157 games, tied for the most full games he would play for the Detroit Tigers, in a season where the Tigers would finish with a 64-98 record. They would win 22 less games than they had won the previous year. They would finish at the bottom of the AL Central for the second time since Castellanos had been on the team. He would go on to log 167 hits in 157 games. This would be the second year in his first 4 seasons that he finished with more hits than games played. He would finish with 73 runs, which would be a career high for him at that point. His 167 hits would be the first time he had more than 162 hits in a 162-game season. His 36 doubles would be the third time in a 4-season stretch he would finish with at least 30 doubles. He would finish with 10 triples, which led the American League. This is the only time that he has actually led the American League in a statistical category, was in triples in his 4th season in Detroit. He would go on to finish with a career high at that point, 26 home runs, and a career high to this date, 101 RBIs. This would be the first time he would hit 20 home runs or log at least 75 RBIs in a season, let alone 100. He would go on to finish with a 272 batting average, which would make it the second straight season he would finish with a batting average of at least 270. He would finish with an 811 OPS, making it the second straight year he had an OPS above 800. And he would finish with 301 total bases, finishing with over 300 bases for the very first time, while establishing himself as one of the best hitters in the game, despite not being named an All-Star. The Tigers would miss the playoffs. This would transition into what would be Nick Castellanos' last full season with Detroit. In his 5th season with the team, in his age 26 season in 2018, he would go on to play 157 games, which is the same amount of games he played in the previous season, but he played 157 games in a season where the Tigers would finish with a 64-98 record. They finished with the same exact record record for the second straight season. In those games, Castellanos would finish with 185 hits in 157 games. This would be the third season in a row in his first 5 seasons that he would finish with more hits than games played. He would have his 185 hits are the most hits that he's ever had in a game to date. The only time he's had over 180. He would finish with 88 runs on the season, which would be a career high for him at that point. The first time he would eclipse 80 runs in a season. He would finish with 46 doubles. This would be the first time he eclipsed 40. This would be the fourth time in his first 5 seasons that he would finish with at least 30 doubles on the season. He would go on to finish with 5 triples. This would be the third time in a 4-year span that he would finish with at least 5 triples on the year. This was after he had led the American League in triples. He would go on to finish with 23 home runs and 89 RBIs. This would be the second year in a row he had finished with at least 20 home runs and at least 80 RBIs. He would finish with a 298 batting average, which at that point was a career high for him. His 384 on-base percentage and his 500 slugging percentage, which is a career high for him at that point, will combine for a then career high 854 OPS, making it the third consecutive season he would finish with an OPS over 800 and an OPS plus over 100, meaning it was better than the average hitter. He would still not be named an all-star that season, even though he would go down as one of the more consistent hitters in all of baseball. But that would be his last full season as Detroit, as like I said, Detroit still has not made the playoffs since then. Going into his 6th season in Detroit, in his age 27 season in 2019, he would play 100 games with the Detroit Tigers before he would end up getting moved to the Chicago Cubs. He would end up getting traded to the Chicago Cubs that season in exchange for a couple of players. He would go on just to finish that season in itself. He played 151 full games in a season that would see the Chicago Cubs ending it with an 84-78 record. They finished with the third best record in the National League Central and went on to miss the playoffs. However, in that season, Castellanos would finish with a total 178 hits in the 151 games he played. This would be the 4th season in his first 6 in which he had more hits than games played. He had 27 more hits than games played within this season itself, which would be pretty much on par with what he had done the year before. He finished with 100 runs. To this date, that is the only time that he has finished with 100 runs. This will be the second time in his career that he had at least 80 in a season. He would hit a career high 58 doubles and would somehow not lead either. He wouldn't lead either league in doubles. I imagine he was finished at the top in total. His 58 doubles are, of course, the most he's ever had, and they are the only time he's ever been able to surpass 50. This would be the 5th time in his first 6 seasons he would have at least 30 doubles in a season, and this would be the second season in a row that he would finish with at least 45, which is crazy. He would go on to finish with 3 triples. He had 27 home runs, which would be a career high for him then. He would finish with 73 RBIs, which would be tied for the 3rd most RBIs for him at that point. He finished with a 289 batting average, which at that point was the second highest batting average he'd ever put together in a season. And he would finish with an 863 OPS, which would be his highest OPS at that point, as he finished with a 339 OBP on base percentage and a then at that point high 863 OPS. And of course, this would be the 4th season in a row he finished with an OPS over 800. And like I said, even after all this, even this being like his 4th season of doing so, he would still not be named an all-star in this league. Following his 6th full season in the league, he will go on to sign with the Cincinnati Reds. He signed a 4-year deal, however. That season he would opt out of his deal eventually. But he would go on to finish within his very first season within Cincinnati, which would be the shortened season where where COVID would shorten the season but would expand the playoffs. He would go on to play all 60 games for a Cincinnati Reds team that would finish with a 31-29 record. They would finish with the third best record in the NL Central and make the playoffs for the very first time since 2013. This would be the year where Trevor Bauer won the Cy Young Award, by the way. In the 60 games he played, Castellanos would finish with 49 hits on the season, with 11 less hits than games played, which would go on to end his 4-year streak of the years before of seasons with more hits than games played. But of course, his full season streak still would carry on. He would go on to finish with 37 runs in those 60 games. He had 11 doubles, 14 home runs alongside 34 RBIs. He finished with a 225 batting average and a 784 OPS in this shortened season, as his OPS plus was exactly at 100, as his OPS was that of the average batter that year. This is a year where they necessarily couldn't name all-stars, but I'm not necessarily sure that Castellanos would have been named when this particular season. But once the Cincinnati Reds would go on to make the playoffs, they would end up getting swept in the National League Wild Card Series by the Atlanta Braves, as this playoffs would end up seeing the LA Dodgers take home their 7th championship in their franchise history. But following this would lead to Nick Castellanos' most recent season, his second and final season with the Cincinnati Reds before opting out of the last 2 years of his contract. In this most recent season, in the MLB's first full season since COVID, he would go on to play 138 games in his age 29 season, in a season where the Cincinnati Reds would finish with an 83-79 record. They had won 8 more games since their last full season, but they had gone on to miss the playoffs this year. Nick Castellanos would make the All-Star game this season for the very first time in his career, and he would also be named a Silver Slugger. He would finish with 164 hits in the 138 games he played. That would be 26 more hits than games played. It would also go down as the 5th season in a 6-year stretch in which he would have more hits than games played. It would be the 4th time in a 5-year stretch that he would have at least 162 hits in a 162-game season. He finished with 95 runs on the season as well. This would be the 2nd time in a 3-year stretch that he has been able to score at least 95 runs. The 3rd time in the last 5 years, excluding the COVID season, in which he was able to score at least 80 times. He would go on to finish with 38 doubles, making it yet another full season, making it 4 full seasons in a row in which he's finished with 30 full doubles. 6 of the last 7 full seasons he's played, he's finished with at least 30. He would go on to finish with 34 home runs, which to this day is the most home runs he's ever hit in a season. It would be the 4th time in the last 5 full seasons, or it would be the 4th time in the last 5 years he would hit at least 20, the one odd year being COVID. This would be the first time in his career that he hit at least 30 in a season. He would go on to finish with 100 RBIs. This would be the 2nd time in his career he finished with at least 100, and the 3rd time he finished with at least 80. We would go on to finish with a 309 batting average. This would be the first time he would finish with a 309 batting average in a full season in his career. He would also finish with a 362 on-base percentage, which to this day is the highest on-base percentage he's ever had. His slugging percentage this most recent season was .576. It was also the highest it's ever been in his career, which of course would add up to a career high .939 OPS. The first time in his career his OPS has been over 900. His OPS plus being at 136 is the highest that it's ever been in his career. He would finish with 306 total bases. This would be the 4th time in his career, his 8-year career at that he was finished with at least 300 total bases, which is a lot of total bases. And after being named an All-Star and a Silver Slugger for the first time in his career, the Reds, like I said, would miss the playoffs. But of course, this transitions us to where we are exactly as Nick Castellanos has opted out of the end of his contract, and he is going to enter his 30s as a free agent, as I can't wait to see how he ages into his 30s, considering it looks as though his hitting is getting a lot sharper, and he's getting more consistent, and he's getting he's starting to really smooth out more of the rough spots in his game. But with that said, I do want to take this time to acknowledge how great of a player Nick Castellanos is. I do think that he is one of the very few elite players within this league, and where you have hundreds of thousands of people from different levels competing for the same spot. With this said, I want to thank the ESPN, the MLB, the Baseball Reference website, the Wikipedia pages that I used in order for the facts and figures for this episode. With that said, I'd recommend watching Nick Castellanos. He doesn't have a team or a number at the moment, but I would recommend watching him just to see how he ages in his 30s. With that said, hopefully by this time next year, I'll have more to say about him by the time he turns 31. And once all of today's exhibitions and matchups are done, I'm going to come back tomorrow on Saturday, March 5th, for another episode of The Elite, as I do have 2 additional profiles tomorrow. But until then, thanks for listening. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with another episode tomorrow. Peace out.